Okay, that was silly. But welcome back to Nain Shorts. I was just playing with my good friend here. I forgot his name. I think it's Gerard. Not 100% sure. I have to double check with Vaughn. We're actually in her area right now, No-Gi Jiu-Jitsu here at Physique Magnifique. Just doing a little shout out to our friends and family here. But welcome back. Last time we were discussing the idea of how do you view your opponent, and what are the things that you really look for in a sparring partner so you can develop those ideas better and have good rapport with them. But recently a thought came up, an idea that just like what you saw earlier today, have you ever looked at a technique video, somebody doing their demonstration live, and your first thought is, that's crap, that would never work? Well, that's what you think in your head. What you say out loud is, I wouldn't do it that way. I think we all at one point or another have been very proud of what we do, and we've looked at something and dismissed it as never going to work, or it's just crap. As we get more respectful, as we learn more, we get the sense of, that's pretty cool, but I would never do it that way. And that we learned from a grandmaster in his 80s. So I don't know if it takes that long to get that level of respect, but I can say that it's something that I've taken to heart. But what's beyond that? What's beyond that I wouldn't do it that way? Well, first of all, let's talk about, what do we initially see? Do we see a technique that we don't understand from a system that we've never trained or trained long enough to know the intricacies behind it? Do we know the individual? Do we know whether that individual can make it work? Because if they can make it work, well then who are we to say that it's crap or that it wouldn't work? Or why wouldn't we do something if they're consistently showing us that, yeah, it does work or it can work? How do we evaluate that information? What you saw just now, to me it looked silly. I felt silly. I don't know if you noticed, I started laughing right away because it felt like a wrestling move. But is that all we saw? Did we just see the contact and the movement? Or did we really break down the person's mechanics? Did we see, were they drawing power from somewhere? What was the intent behind it? What were they trying to accomplish? I think if we start asking questions like this whenever we see anything, then we might get a better insight as to why somebody would do something a certain way and when it would be appropriate to do it. Now, it's not very probable that we're going to be able to train every single martial art deep enough to get a profound understanding of it. But if we take the time to understand the common ground, the common denominator behind every martial art, and that is movement in general, how and where you can generate power, what other ways you can develop more power. Just recently I had a conversation with an individual, and he talked about the way that the body turns and how to generate power that way, which then he illustrated through various other demonstrations from different arts. I just had a lesson with my instructor, Rick, where he talked about the vibration that happens when two sticks match. And he broke down how that idea can develop into even more power. Now, that is nothing to do with any particular art or technique. That's just literally what happens when two sticks clash. If one has more force than the other one bounces back. But if you can figure out why that happens and then stop it from happening, all of a sudden you're hitting much harder. That's not related to a technique. That's just the way it works. That's just something that happened, and figuring out how to keep it from happening at its most basic and core. So what are we really looking at when we say, I wouldn't do it that way? Now, there are other factors involved in this, don't get me wrong. It's not just the understanding. That's a huge part of it. But it could boil down to, my knees are bad. There's no way I can drop that low. So no, that's really good, but I wouldn't do it that way because I physically am incapable of doing it. But if that's not the case, then are you diving deep enough? Are you thinking enough about it to really evaluate what's going on and get a sense for it? And even if you do and you still find that, no, I wouldn't do it that way or I wouldn't work, could you make it work? Did you understand enough of it to say, okay, if I tweak this, if I tweak that, if I add a little bit of what I know to this, all of a sudden it's a viable idea, a viable technique. It's not about the information being good or bad. At the end of the day, it's what you do with that information. So if the demonstration was poorly executed, or maybe that individual just doesn't know as much as the people before him or their instructors, well, that doesn't mean the information is bad. It just means it wasn't presented completely. And I get it. You can't give away everything at a 15-minute demonstration. And there's no way you can explain everything in a short period of time. But if we start automatically looking beyond what's in front of us at any given point, then we're going to peer and see the face of the wizard. And if you don't know that reference, then you might be very, very young. But the point is, you want to see what's behind the curtain, what's behind the ideas that are happening in front of you. And if all you ever see is the face value, you're never going to get there. It really boils down to a simple concept, which is, think about it. Sounds silly to say out loud, but just think about it. Think about what it is you really understand, and is there any correlation to what you know? If there isn't, one of two things is happening. Either there isn't enough information on your end to make the connection, or not enough information was shown to you at the time to make a connection. Because remember, regardless of what the physical movement is, it is in fact a physical movement. The human body is composed of limbs, 2 arms, 2 legs. And there are various ways of using them, and there have been entire martial arts created and developed and grown on just a few of those ideas. Take judo, for example. Throws, using the entire body, the way that you grab and you pull. It's a push and pull, use your hip, you throw. There are various ways to throw, but that's the concentration of it. You have something like Muay Thai where now you're using contact, points of contact, which is the fists, the elbows, the knees. Then you take those ideas and you put it into a combative concept. Now all of a sudden, not just the elbows and the knees, now you have headbutts, you have grabs, you have pulls. Instead of grabbing somebody's gi, you grab somebody's hair, somebody's ear, and the purpose is to tear them down, literally. But again, the focus changed, but the same ideas, the same concept that were taken from 2 various arts are now being applied differently. Still the same techniques. Sure, what you do on the mat may not work out on the streets. What you do in the streets will get you disqualified on the mat. So there are differences. But if we can find the parts that connect them together, if we can look at that Venn diagram where you have the self-improvement, the combat, and then the sport, and if you can start seeing where they connect and what are the ideas that can be found through all of them, well then it becomes much easier to peer behind that veil and really see and understand why people are doing what they're doing. And then all of a sudden what originally was a crappy idea, respectfully something you wouldn't do, is now a new concept or a new technique that you could develop into your repertoire that could make it worthwhile. It's not the information, it's what you do with it that matters. So going back to what we were doing earlier, when you saw me, I came in and I just slapped. I was thinking of wrestling. And you see that slap all the time. Now, if we think about it, that slap in itself will probably hurt a lot. Because Wrestlers are pretty big. They're pretty muscular. Just the weight of that arm alone is probably going to hurt. But they're also conditioned to receive big moves like that. So in contrast, is it really going to make that much of an impact? Probably not. But let's not dismiss it completely. I've had the pleasure of playing with some art where there are open palm strikes. And they can hurt a hell of a lot more. Not to mention a spinning back fist, you're using the back of the fist. So if we break down this idea, well, one, I'm hitting with the back of the fist, but it's a chest. So I'm not going to do a lot of damage here. Okay. But can I generate more force just before we even dive into the rest of the ideas? So if I rotate my hips more, if I drop my weight down at an angle, now I can generate a lot more force. Now, that's without me cranking. I took the same mechanics of this lazy chop, concentrated on them, and developed more power. Now, instead of having an open hand, now I close my fist and I try to dig my knuckles into the center line. Okay? Now, what if I don't want to use my fist? What if I want to use my palm, just like some of the other arts that I've come across? Well, then I'd have to turn my hand. It's just a simple mechanical adjustment. Again, I rotate, concentrate everything on the movement, and now the impact, I drop slightly lower into what I assume would be the solar plexus, which we know is very vulnerable. So the same mechanics, the same technique is now being applied differently with the ideas that I understand of the human mechanics, as well as what I'm trying to accomplish with that particular move, and all of a sudden, this silly slap can become something a lot more devastating. Now that's just the movement itself, and right now it's right here. What if I hit the neck with the same amount of force? What if I hit a floating rib? Or even down here? Again, the mechanics are all the same, but the application of it has now changed because I added what I understand of my mechanics. What I understand when it comes to the sense of combat and what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. This is a flashy move. This is the same motion. But because I thought about it beyond what I did, beyond what I first saw, I could turn it into something more. Now, to you, the audience, this could be another example of, well, that's just crap. Or, you would never do it that way, because I know you all are very respectful. But think about it. Are there any techniques in the things that you do that have the similar mechanics? Can you say that you can find the common denominator between what you do and what you just saw right now? Because again, this is a two-dimensional screen. There's only so much that I can show you. And without you feeling it, there's only so much that you'll be able to understand through the screen. So, what's the common denominator? Again, it's you. Your body, how you move, what you can do with it, what you have done with it, the successes you have and the failures that you've had. Strengthening the successes and going back to your failures and saying, hey, was I missing some piece of information? Something that might have been said in this video or by some other instructor that could help you elevate those failures into successful techniques or movements. I don't know. That's for each of you to decide how deep you want to go into that rabbit hole. But the whole point of this is, how do we make ourselves better? And it starts by being able to evaluate the things that we see, whether from our personal instructors or visiting instructors, or we happen to go into another school and starting from scratch again in a different system. I don't know if you've noticed, folks, but there's a bit of a trend in all the videos that we've had so far. It's about learning. For yourself more than anything else. And if we can raise the quality of our learning process, even just by a little bit, it's going to change everything that you can do and open new doors to things that you couldn't imagine you were capable of before. So, hopefully this is a good way to start and a good place to kind of get your mind mulling on a few ideas. Thank you for joining me again on Nain's Shorts. Till next time, you guys have a wonderful day. 3, 2, 1, cut!